Sam Kahn joins us Thursdays, theathletic.com. Sam, thank you very much for your time. What are your thoughts? Games on Thursday or Friday or Saturday or Tuesday, as long as you get the eyeballs and the money for the league, matter to you?
I think it's okay in moderation. I think where we get a little out of hand is when you have teams playing multiple weekday games in a row in succession. I seem to remember last year or the year before when Sam Houston moved into Conference USA, I think they had 5 midweek games in a row. It's like 3 Wednesdays and 2 Thursdays or something to that effect. And I think that can be a little challenging and disruptive for those schedules. And also, I don't, for some schools, I think it can be a boondoggle on attendance because a weeknight is harder to get out for times, especially you got people getting off work and things like that. So it can hurt the attendance. But on the flip side, from a national exposure standpoint, it's going to be a lot easier for me to turn on a MAC game or a Conference USA game on a weeknight than it is going to be on a Saturday when they're going up against all the Power 4 conference schools. So I think there's good and bad. Certainly as someone in the state of Texas, I don't love that we have a ton of Friday games in the state on the night when high school football is a big deal. But I also understand that TV money rules the roost, and so that's a little bit of a necessary evil at this point.
Sam, the big news this week obviously comes out of the ACC with the settlement regarding Florida State and Clemson and their lawsuits about the grant of rights. And we now know basically there's a 5-year clock that's ticking. It could be faster if Florida State decides they just want to pay way more money just to get out that much earlier. But basically right now, as we know it, there's a 5-year clock. And then after that, nobody really knows. But just what was your reaction to that getting settled and having a big question mark in terms of kind of the future answered? And now, how do you look at this moving forward? Did the ACC, do well for themselves here? Is this a big, massive win? Like, how do you judge what all you've seen in the reactions this week?
I think it's hard to make a grand proclamation about what the future may hold for the ACC just because we've seen this before in the Big 12, right? There were concessions made for Texas and OU. And then there was a flirtation with expansion in 2016. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Texas and OU still left. And so no matter what you do to appease the schools now, it doesn't necessarily alleviate every concern that they have. I do think it alleviates some concerns, and providing some stability in the short term is good because I don't think we need any more realignment, at least in the traditional sense. Of course, I'd prefer that we were back the way we were 15 years ago with the conference lines we had then. But I think it's good in the short term for the ACC. I think it's good in the short term for all those other teams that are not Clemson or FSU or maybe North Carolina because it provides some stability, especially if you're Cal or Stanford or SMU who just got there. The last thing you need is the league being in upheaval. And so certainly this feels like it buys you a little bit of stability, but who knows how long because – you say 5 years. I seem to remember OU and Texas announcing their move 4 years before their grant of rights was up with the Big 12. So who's to say how fast this stuff moves? But it does seem to set up to where it lines up more with where some of the other rights contracts and the other conferences are going to expire or at least come up for negotiation. So I think if we see any other major changes, it's going to probably happen in the lead up to that 2030, 2031 type window.
Yeah, because Texas OU, that story by Brett Zerdeman was in July of 2021.
2021 summer.
So then so 3 years later, a little bit before 3 years later, they actually officially joined the SEC. So yeah, because you're not going to announce that you're leaving the week before the conference. The next you join a conference, there's got to be some sort of timeline there. You mentioned Stanford, Cal, and also SMU. I read a note from Billy Embody. He covers SMU, and he said. When I asked him, I said, what's the mood there this afternoon on Monday? And he goes, it's a little, see, it's okay. He said, the good news, it's still stability. There is still stability. It's not like this is going to be in 2 years, like you said. Then all of a sudden you're like, why did we do what we did, although it's been successful for SMU, no doubt?
Yeah, no doubt. And honestly, they're forfeiting rights money anyway. So it's not like
that's exactly
it's not like SMU is relying on the TV money at this point. SMU made the move to the ACC for access. And we saw that pay off in a big way because all of a sudden they got access to the college football playoff. And I think that is a massive success any way you slice it. You think about the program was on the trajectory up before then, but getting into the playoff and having that national exposure and having your program with that platform, you really can't put a number for how valuable that is for a program. I know we're only a couple of years, maybe almost 3 years removed from TCU going to 2022. I know it seems like a long time ago because a lot has happened since then, but I still think that matters a lot for that program as well. Those moments in the sun, I think, matter for these programs. We still talk about Boise State in 2007 and their upset of Oklahoma. Those moments for those programs matters a lot. And so SMU really just needed the access more than anything. They could figure the money out because they've got enough money people, and they've taken full advantage of it from an athletic department standpoint. So having the stability from the ACC standpoint for them is good. But I have a feeling that no matter what happens, they're going to try to figure out a way or find a way to stay in the group that is competing for national championships in the long term.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting because it's obvious the Texas schools don't want them. I mean, they've had their opportunity over and over again, and so it's like, just what would that even look like? But obviously there's a lot of things that we just don't know yet. Like, it's impossible to really predict anything because there's just so many uncertainties. But it does lead to wondering, to speculation. I was just curious, Sam, because we've seen the Super League term pop up now again as a result of this, and that's not going to go away. What is your definition of a Super League?
I think it's probably a group of about 40 schools, maybe, that 30 to 40, depending on where you want to draw the line of demarcation, who have the most resources and the most success in their history and have the ability to, if not compete for a national championship, at least be in the conversation for it. So I'm not saying, I don't think it's all of the SEC and the Big Ten. I think it's probably your top 8-ish teams in the SEC, maybe. I guess maybe so top half of that league. And then probably, I don't know if it's 8 in the Big Ten, but there's a handful of programs in the Big Ten that would qualify as that too. So maybe it's less than 30. At least the way I view it is the way that they try to construct it in European soccer, which is I think they took either it was 12 or 16 European teams that they tried to put together. Of course, that thing got shouted down by the fans and never happened. But that's essentially what I think of a Super League as. I think the way that people are viewing it is essentially an SEC and Big Ten break off plus a few other brands like Clemson or FSU or whoever else fits that description. Either one I could see taking hold. I think the more likely outcome is the ones who generate the most revenue, especially when you see what the ACC did with the revenue share and how they're going to distribute that. At some point, you have to wonder if the Big Ten and the SEC schools, the ones that are at the top of the revenue food chain, are going to say, well, should we do something like that instead of distributing money equally to 16 SEC schools? Maybe Alabama and LSU and Texas and all these other programs that generate the most TV ratings, maybe they're going to try to do that. It's too early to say, but it's not a too far a logical leap to take at this point, is it?
No,
we've been talking about the same thing.
Yeah,
actually,
that's one of my points, is that even though these schools that are in those two conferences are protected, because they are, it's like there's a big fence around them and they've allowed people in. But if they're already looking at the possibility of separating, they would not keep some of them from separating again. For example, Michigan does not want to feed Minnesota. You mentioned, obviously, Ohio State or whoever feeding Purdue, et cetera, whatever the examples are. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to see that happen. But if it doesn't keep anybody from doing that again, and I don't know. So if it's 40, you're not going to leave 3 or 4 of the teams out of the ACC. The Big 12 hopes that they have whoever it might be connected to it. It's so intriguing to me of what that might look like.
Ticket Club is a unique platform that aims to revolutionize the way consumers purchase event tickets. It primarily functions as a membership-based ticketing platform, offering a wide array of tickets to concerts, sporting events, theater shows, and other live entertainment events. The main distinction of Ticket Club from other ticketing platforms is its commitment to delivering tickets with no service fees. Features and benefits of Ticket Club. One of the most distinctive features of Ticket Club is the absence of service fees. Most ticketing platforms charge service fees, which can elevate the cost of the ticket significantly. However, with Ticket Club, the price you see is the price you pay. This translates to substantial savings, especially for frequent ticket buyers. Ticket Club also offers a diverse selection of event tickets. From Broadway shows and music concerts to NFL games and comedy shows, Ticket Club has it all. This diversity makes it an ideal ticketing platform for all entertainment lovers. Reliability and pricing. When it comes to reliability, Ticket Club does not disappoint. The platform guarantees the delivery of authentic tickets on time for the event. In the rare case that a problem arises, the company promises to refund 100% of the purchase price. Ticket Club operates on a membership basis. Non-members can still purchase tickets, but they are subject to small service fees. To enjoy the no service fees benefit, one can join as a member at a fee of $49.99 per year. However, certain groups, such as military personnel and first responders, can receive free memberships as a thank you for their service. Customer support. Customer support is a critical aspect of any business, and Ticket Club excels in this area. The platform provides comprehensive customer support to ensure all queries and issues are handled in a timely and professional manner. Customers can reach out via phone or email, and the Help Center on their website offers answers to frequently asked questions. Unique features and benefits. In addition to the no service fees feature, Ticket Club has a unique feature called the Ticket Club Premier program. This allows members to earn points on their purchases, which can be redeemed for discounts on future purchases. This feature adds to the overall value provided by the platform and encourages customer loyalty. In conclusion, the introduction to Ticket Club reveals a platform that is designed with the customer in mind. The no service fees policy, diverse event selection, reliability, competitive pricing, and excellent customer support make Ticket Club an appealing choice for purchasing event tickets. Whether you're a sports fanatic, a theater enthusiast, or a concert goer, Ticket Club is your reliable partner for event tickets.
I don't think it's hard to imagine because we kind of have sort of seen it before. We haven't seen the Super League form, but we've seen teams get left behind. You remember the Pac-12 a couple of years ago because Cal and Stanford got left behind, and Washington State and Oregon State got left behind by the teams that went to the Big Ten and the Big 12. We saw it in the Southwest Conference in the 90s. Texas A&M, Baylor, and Texas Tech left Houston, SMU, TCU, and Rice behind. So it's not unprecedented to happen. It's just what does the end product look like, and would they go that far as to insulate themselves from the other brands of the conference? The only thing I could see stopping it at this point is the league leadership, because those are the guys, Petiti and Sankey, are the ones that hold the cards at this point. And I think are they willing to take that step and push that button? I don't get the sense yet that they are, but at what point do they relinquish that power? Or what point do the schools themselves say, screw it, we're going to do it anyway?
Yeah, you're right. When the Big Ten, when the Big Eight and the Southwest Conference merged, they left people behind. There's the precedent there. They left them behind. They left Rice in Houston, TCU, and I'm forgetting somebody. They said, sorry, it's politics involved, money involved, value involved, but they did. They left them behind. I forgot about that. Arkansas had left, so they didn't have to worry about that part because they were already a part of the SEC. So it has happened before. Do you like that idea? Is that enough? Are those enough teams that really, truly have a true national champion in college football at the highest level?
I think with Buddy Elliott, who works at 247 CBS, who does Cover 3 podcasts, they do a really good job. I think he puts the number at around 18. I think in terms of teams that actually win it, that's probably about right. But of teams that you could say you could put in the conversation at any given point, in terms of, okay, here are teams that could win a few games in a playoff, and maybe they can play their way, and that's where you start including the TCUs of the world. Maybe that number somewhere between 30 and 40. And so here's the other thing, and I'll go back to what I just said earlier too. The other entity that could stop something like this is the TV networks, because at what point do they realize that chopping off such a large portion of the college football fan base, is it worth it? Because sure, a Super League in theory is interesting to talk about when you talk about all those matchups, but you're chopping off the fans of Vanderbilt and the fans of Illinois and all the Big 12 fans and all the ACC fans that are not fans of teams named FSU and Clemson and North Carolina. So that's not when you add they may not be individually big fan bases on their own, but you add all those schools up, that's a pretty large chunk. So that's the other part that is fascinating about this is, what is TV's appetite for it? Or do they have an appetite to make the league or make college football that exclusive to where it's only a handful of programs competing for national championships in an official way where there's actually no access path for everyone else. I sure hope we don't get there because I don't like any of that. I don't even like that we're trying to expand it at this point with guaranteed bids for more for one conference than the other. I think that's silly on its face. But you do that's the other entity that has the power in this. And you have to wonder, are they going to do the math long term on that? Because the more you shut out these fan bases, the more casual fans I think turn away, because you will have some casual fans who will turn in to see the best of the best. But this is not like, I think this is different from European soccer. College football is probably the most similar entity to European soccer that any American sport is. But these are still schools and they're still entities that fans have a personal connection to, that they went there, they studied there, they had some of their formative years and most memorable years of their lives there. That attachment still matters. And the closer you get to a super league where you only have 30 or 40 schools competing for something, the closer you get to removing that part of it. And if you remove that emotional attachment and you remove hope from the equation, then I think you're walking down a really dangerous path.
Sam, I've been around a long time, so it's easy to sometimes get jaded or just used to stuff, but also just things change. I remember how big of a deal spring football was when I first started covering college football, or how exciting at least it was. Now, granted, there was no transfer portal, there was no NIL, there was none of that going on, so you kind of knew you were watching the team that you were going to be watching, and so you could build it up, right? That's all gone. And so I think I've taken a little bit of a hit in terms of just my spring enjoyment, because I don't know if the team I'm watching is going to be that team in like 5 months from now, but where's your level of spring enjoyment at this point in your career, and just knowing sort of the way the Matt Rules have talked about it now, of the lack of spring games and all that's come with that these days?
It's definitely toned down for the actual practice and the spring game. That stuff, I'll still watch it. It's not as exciting and interesting because, like you said, 10% of the roster or 15% of the roster may change come April 16th. So you don't know if that's the full team. And also, when you get to spring games now, coaches are so paranoid, they make everything so vanilla. So it's hard to draw a lot of conclusions from it. I still enjoy spring as a chance to really deep dive into teams. And you guys have been doing it lately with your going through every team schedule for 15 minutes in the Big 12. This is a chance to, and I use it as a reporter to go visit schools, go talk to coaches. And there's no game on Saturday, so you don't have that looming deadline. You're not in a rush. There's time for coaches and players to sit and visit, and you can really dive deep into some of their stories and learn a little bit more about the program or where they're headed and fixate on the direction and trajectory of these programs. So I still like it for that part. I still love the off season, and the off season is more interesting, I think, than ever because of the portal. But as far as spring football itself, some of the value of it, I think, has gone away just because the roster still changes. And I think until we get to a point where you are practicing with your entire roster, then I think there's always going to be a ceiling on how valuable it is. It's more, hey, let's get to where we have our entire team with us. Then you can start to draw some conclusions and I think make some real proclamations about what you have.
Joey McGuire last week said that he still likes the old way of going about spring. Of course, he has a lot of players for it. We mentioned that earlier, but a lot of teams do. And then Phil Snow joined us yesterday, who's now with Matt Rule back at Nebraska. And he said that he thinks the spring drills more important for the younger players. That if you have a guy that's a third-year player or a redshirt, whatever, but he thinks that would hurt the development of the younger players, either freshmen or those who didn't play, and that, he thinks, is what's good about spring football.
Yeah, and I do think we're getting closer to a point where we're going to have to figure out that one size does not fit all for everybody, because every team is different. Like you said, teams that have a lot of returnees, they're in one boat. Teams that have a lot of newcomers are in a different boat. I do think there is some credence to, you don't necessarily have to replicate the NFL model, but I think there are some points you can take from it. For instance, the NFL has a rookie minicamp. What's to stop a college football program from having a freshman version of that, or newcomers, where you have, okay, we're going to set aside these couple of weeks for our freshmen and our transfers, and then we're going to bring the returnees this next week and then do them for a few weeks. and so on and so forth. I think the spring schedule probably requires some creativity at this point. I don't, and especially too, because you're going to have some teams who finish their season in November because they didn't make a bowl game, or they finish their season in December because they made a early bowl game, and you're going to have other teams who played into late January. And so the calendar doesn't necessarily work for everybody, and the format's not going to necessarily work for everybody because you have 136 teams now in the FBS this year. Not every one of them is going to be able to fit around the same thing. It's not like high school football where you can say, okay, everybody reports on this date, and if you had spring, you do report on this date. It's a little different in college, and so I think you have to adapt to that and work for real-world solutions that fit what we're dealing with now, as opposed to trying to retrofit the teams to the old philosophy.
We had a list earlier, Sam Kahn with theathletic.com, about the quarterback CBS Sports rated the top 10. It's a hell of a list. I mean, there's some dudes now that are 4, 5, 6, whatever. Arch Manning has all the tools. We've seen it. We've seen glimpses of it. And we also saw that game earlier when Quinn Ewers didn't play, where he was phenomenal and won even some weekly awards, that honors that week. He's going to have weapons because Texas is loaded. Sarkisian's a great play caller. Is he as good as you, from the glimpses you've seen? Do you feel like that carries over and he is a part of all these high-level awards and he's going to be that good his first year as a starter?
I mean, who's to say? It's hard to say. I do think he's going to be really good. I don't know that I'm ready to say he's going to be the best quarterback in the country. I do think it's fair to say he could be a top 10 quarterback in the country next year. The physical tools are substantial, and his ability to drive the ball, the velocity, the deep ball accuracy, and then his athletic ability. And that's where it's going to fall on Steve Sarkisian. And I'm really curious. Sark has never been a guy who runs the quarterback. He's always been a drop back passer, play action pass heavy system guy. With Arch, I think it behooves you to use his legs a little bit, whether it's in the read option or whether it's RPOs and trying to get him moving that way. I think it's going to be really critical for them to use that part of it to make defenses account for that part of his game. And that will open it up, because if defenses are worried about you running the ball, all of a sudden the middle of the field opens up, because you're going to have a linebacker trying to account for that. And then all of a sudden you can sneak a receiver back there or a tight end back there. And then all of a sudden you've got open guys to work with. So I think his ability is really good. Everything that you hear about in terms of his preparation and how he approaches it, he seems to approach it like a pro. Obviously, he's got the pedigree. I think he's going to be really good. I don't think he's going to be perfect, because he's only started 2 games and he has made some mistakes. When I saw him against Louisiana Monroe in his first start last year, you could tell there were some times where he tried to force it in there. And I think that confidence at times may work against him, that he's going to try to force some balls in because he's confident in his ability to get the ball there. And so those are things you're going to have to work. There's just going to be some things that he's going to see that he hasn't had to see very much. And you only will see as a full-time starter. And that's one of the reasons why Quinn Ewers came back, was he said that when they did the research that NFL quarterbacks that go on to the NFL have better chances of success when they started 25 games or more at the college level. We're talking about Arch has had 2. And so that's a big gap in experience. So some things you're only going to learn by actually doing, but I do think his physical skill set, his mental preparation, his pedigree, the coach he has calling the plays, he's got the same offensive coordinator, play caller, and quarterbacks coach for his entire career. All those are advantages for him. Plus, you mentioned all the things he has to work around him. All those work in his favor. The one thing I would say is a little bit of a question mark for me is the offensive line. They do bring some guys who have starting experience, but they're losing a ton of guys. They're losing Jake Majors. Mm-hmm. They're losing Kelvin Banks. They're losing Cam Williams. So they're Hayden Connor. So they're losing a lot of guys off that line, and that's gonna take time. I don't think they're gonna be an elite line right away. They're gonna have to work themselves into that. And so how does Arch handle pressure? How does he handle when guys are coming off the edge, breathing down his throat, and he's getting hit multiple times a game? We haven't had to see a ton of that. We've seen him a little bit, but I like to see how he handles that. But I do think he's going to be a really good quarterback, and it won't stun me in the least if he's a top 10 quarterback in the country.
Would it surprise you at all if he stays the next couple of years? Because, so many people want to force him into the NFL. I think wishful thinking, if anything. But I feel like he's probably going to start a couple of years at Texas, because he doesn't seem like he's in any rush, nor does he necessarily have to get to the league to to support mom and dad or anything like that either, right? So, yeah, that wouldn't shock me at all, Sam, if we see him play a couple of years as a starter.
No, not at all. I mean, he's done everything else differently in his career. He did his recruitment differently. He's done his early college career differently, and he's been patient on that front. And so I would not – it would actually be on brand if he stayed for 2 years and waited until going to the NFL. And that 2 years, if you assume that Texas goes and plays a couple playoff games each time, that puts him pretty close to that 25 start mark that I was talking about. So – that probably sets him up for success a little bit more in the NFL. And honestly, no matter how good he is, I think there's a value to that. There's a value to doing it over and over again at the college level for a little bit and then trying to move on at that point. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if he stays into the 2026 season. And I think Texas obviously is hoping for that as well.
I'll never forget what Bill Parcells said about drafting a quarterback. He wanted a quarterback that had at least 30 starts and had won 23 of those 30 games. And I think there might have even been like a snap count, like a certain amount of snap. Now, that would be harder to do now in this day and age of college football with players getting out quicker. Like they still have to play a certain amount of years, but 30 starts was his key, 23 wins. And back then, he did not want underclassmen. I would think that particular philosophy for him might change. But that goes to what you said about Arch and what he might. I tell you what, thank you, Sam. Appreciate your time and being on with us as long as you were.